All right. Happy Friday, everybody. We're here to do the Week 5 Underdog Fantasy Pick'em Show. And we have a guest this week, Josh Larky. Let's get it. All right, I am Liam. Today we have on Josh Larky of the 33rd team. Help me make a pick 5 slip on Underdog Fantasy. Josh, how you doing on this lovely Friday afternoon?
I'm doing well. We got a little double dose. We did a stream 2 days ago for some best ball for the 33rd team. Now we're doing a little pick'em stream for your YouTube. I am looking forward to this. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. I guess real quick, I'll review the slip I made last week. Last week I made a slip of just under on touchdowns. Now my slip did not hit. It had Justin Jefferson in it. Not a player I want to fade, but this is not sharing. Let me share it like this. But someone, actually a guy I went to college with, John, watched the show, and when you watch the show, the lines may be stale. So he made his own pick 5 of unders on Hurts, Allen, Madison, and Mixon. So love to see that. Love to see him thinking independently, and hopefully I can get a winning slip here. How this show works is we usually just scroll the lobby, and then we'll end with a pick 5 slip. Josh, before we do that, could you tell the people a little bit about your own pick'em process for over-unders on players, passing yards, rushing yards, what have you?
Yeah, so my background is in analytics. I have a master's in analytics. That's how I kind of broke into the football industry, is that I knew something about football and I knew how to code. And I feel like over time I've leaned actually less into the hardcore coding part of it and a little more into just football logic, intuition. I still code. I still want to make sure that the numbers make sense. But I think ultimately what I'm looking for is a play that mathematically has generally hit pretty often in the past, or has hit very often in similar conditions. And then I try and logically figure out if the conditions look similar. So maybe it's, this running back is usually hit going over 60 rushing yards. And they're also facing a defense that has generally struggled against running backs. And then we look and it's like, there's a backup quarterback in this week. And then I'd be like, well, you know what? This is now a factor that I wasn't necessarily excited about. We don't necessarily have a very big sample of that type of situation. So I might say, you know what, I'm going to pass. Whereas if it was like, all right, everything's pretty normal. We've got both quarterbacks and both teams ready. I'd say, this guy generally hits that rushing yards over. We've got a lot of yards per carry allowed by the defense. A few other factors start to line up. That starts to become a pretty good bet or a pretty good pick that I'm willing to take. So I'd say my process has become very much a blend where I'll kind of default to my math background as a support system.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot more logic-based. I think I start at the chalk players of the week in DFS land. So for me, that would be players like Achane this week, David Montgomery this week, Breece Hall this week. Check out those lines. And a little bit more narrative-based, where it's like Washington is bad against the deep ball. I mean, that's just like what has happened. A.J. Brown tore them up. So like a DJ Moore line would have been tempting to me versus a bad Commanders D. And you'll probably get a lower line on a player like DJ Moore than you should, just because it's part of the Bears offense. So looking for like lower lines to attack. As always, guys, if you're making like a slip for $5, $10, you might as well throw in one of these freebies that they give. Josh is in Colorado, so he doesn't actually have access to this lobby. So he's just going to have to rip it live with me. We'll start with the Jacksonville Buffalo game. I don't know how you feel about any of these players. A little bit what has happened for Bills opponents is Buffalo plays a lot of zone defense. So the running backs have been getting a lot of dump off in garbage time against them. That makes the receptions line on ETN tempting to me. The receiving yards, any sticking out to you on Jacksonville's side?
So what I'm hearing, based on how you scrolled, I'm not allowed to pad my stats and take the Tua over half a yard line. That doesn't
No,
count
we're
towards my
gonna
personal
make
record on
one
this year.
without those. Of course, if you're watching on your end, you might as well throw these guys in if you're betting $20 and under on your slip. I think
So the one that I would consider, I've actually taken him in like the betting markets, is I took a Travis Etienne rushing yards ladder, and 64.5 is a high number. That's probably not going to be one of my 4 or 5 favorite plays as we're making this slip, but
yeah.
I think it should be in consideration. Essentially, Etienne has generally been getting close to 18 carries in most normal game scripts. The Buffalo Bills allow 6 yards per carry to running backs, which is sneakily the most in the NFL. And then if we're thinking logic, you're a logic guy. I'm also a logic guy. The Jaguars, for the first time in NFL history, the first time in history, are playing back-to-back games in London.
Yeah, that's an interesting component.
Liam, you're a traveling man. I'm a traveling man. Have you ever been to Europe? Because when I went, I was tired. There is a time difference. The Bills are going to be traveling. They're going to have that time difference. The Jaguars have just decided to stay there the past week and a half. So I think there's actually a pretty nice advantage there for the Jaguars in terms of kind of their strength in the trenches. I think this could actually be a battle that the big guys who are a little jet lagged on the Bills are losing at times. Already would consider the over on ETN at that number just in a typical game. And I think the factors line up a little nicely. So it feels gross sometimes to take over 64.5 on a rushing yards prop, especially when they're an underdog.
Bills.
But I don't think that is the worst idea. Maybe we go with the total yards if you like the receptions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because on the Bills defense side, like if I had to ride with one player here, I'm kind of tempted by Kirk and Ridley, where the Bills play a lot of zone. They just lost Tre'Davious White for the season. I'm not sure if Jordan Poyer's playing, so their secondary is a little banged up. On the flip side, they might get Von Miller playing. They also, I do not think, are going to have their Greg Rousseau, their defensive end. So they're missing a couple defensive players. I was talking about my dad with exactly what you said, where it feels like Buffalo is just a class above Jacksonville in the NFL. But this extra week of staying in London is an interesting angle. We'll keep it scrolling here. Like a slot wide receiver against Buffalo. That's what makes the Kirk line tempting. And then on the Ridley side, it's just, I think he's been unlucky in the past couple of games. And if he hadn't been, and against Atlanta, he got like shadow coverage against their top corner, Terrell, I think it is. So I think he's better than this line indicates. Like he should be like more. I still think he's an alpha. I don't know where you're at on Ridley, but we'll keep it moving here.
Yeah, I still like Ridley, but he's not someone I would necessarily want to do like put in a pick'em slip where you're kind of essentially banking on a 50-50 outcome. I think with Ridley, I'd rather bet on more of an outlier outcome, like whether or not he reaches 75, 100 yards, something like that.
Where are you at on defensive players? Do you ever, because I feel like there could be a real edge of grinding some IDP takes. I don't say I'm qualified for that. Lower on a Josh Allen sack one is kind of tempting.
That's what I was
because
thinking.
It's hard to sack Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen as is, and you can get the lower on a sack prop all the time.
Yeah, I'm pulling him up right now just to kind of see how he's done this year. Looks like
he's a good player. If I pull it up
here, he's had
here,
6 sacks on the season. He had 3 sacks week 1.
Yeah.
No sacks in week 2 or week 3. 3 sacks in week 4. Though when we look at the quarterbacks, pretty big disparity. So we got 3 sacks on Anthony Richardson in week 1, rookie quarterback, and then he got 3 sacks on Desmond Ridder. Did not sack CJ Stroud. Did not sack Patrick Mahomes. I would definitely lean on the under here, personally. So I don't think that's the worst one out there. But
no, I mean it's kind of like an under on a touchdown one.
Yeah, I wish I was a defense guy. I have a friend, Patrick. He's in the 33rd team Discord. He'll drop some tackle props in there. He has a big defensive model, and I just kind of take whatever he tells me to take because I don't have time right now to create that model myself.
I think the under 6.5 rushing attempts for Josh Allen, like he's not been running that much this year. I think he will run if he needs to. Like if the Bills, if this game is more competitive and a little bit closer and he needs to on offense, he would run, but we'll keep it moving on. We'll see if there's any lower lines we can pick off.
I was
James
going to
Cook.
say Allen's been under 6.5 every game.
Yeah.
He's had 4, 3, 3, and 6. So
yeah, I think
that's
that's definitely a tempting line there. I don't know how are like tush pushes counted? Is that a rushing attempt? Yes, right?
Yeah, it's a rushing attempt. It also counts as a tush push, but it will count in the stat sheet as a rush attempt.
But what the Bills did last week is they did the tush push, but what they did is they gave the ball to James Cook, and Josh Allen was the tush pusher of James Cook, which seems like a smarter way to do it, where you don't risk your quarterback and the quarterback just pushes the running back.
Yeah, I would just have a big guy on my roster, and they would be the tush push kind of guy. So whether that's some kind of fullback or whoever that is, or the backup quarterback, that's definitely how I would handle it. I would not want my high-priced Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Justin Fields type guy. Like anyone that has some kind of value, I would not want my potential franchise quarterback getting the tush push.
I would say over on Gabe Davis and over on Kincaid are in consideration. Kincaid, 28.5. That's just kind of a low line for a dude who you think could ascend over the course of a season. And then Gabe Davis can do this in one catch, 38.5. That's usually a higher number, but maybe jet lag is a reason that's lower.
Yeah, I like Davis. I mentioned him on a show a couple days ago. The Jaguars are giving up nearly 14 yards per reception to receivers. That's top 10 in the NFL. And check my numbers here.
Top 10 worse in the NFL.
The Jaguars, top 10 highest yards per reception allowed.
Yeah.
To receivers. And then also they've given up the third most pass plays of 40 or more yards. And as we know, based on that line, a 40-yard pass would get it done for Gabe Davis. But yeah, the jet lag, I think, is definitely a concern with any kind of Bills over in this game.
Yeah. Which, McDermott said that they're going to lean on their sports science, which is kind of what you want to hear, not just like a vibe-based approach. Lamar, this Pitt secondary is awful. So higher on passing yards in consideration. I think lower on Gus Edwards, just like anytime feels like a tempting number. He was like a workhorse last week, but I would think that was because Justice Hill was banged up.
Interesting. I would actually say that I'd lean over on Edwards. I've seen the betting markets. The 43.5 is juiced as if it's going to hit. Like it was like minus 165 to go over 43.5.
Interesting.
I think I'd lean that way too, just because he has been getting more work. I think he's been over that number each of the past 3 games, if I remember correctly, by quite a bit.
But it was a pretty 50-50 split when it was Edwards and Hill, and then Hill got banged up. So
I think
he's still Hill can emerge as the RB1. But you're right. I mean, Pitt is brutally bad. Under on Najee Harris is also just a line I can like close my eyes and bet for rushing yards. He's going to get there sometimes. The question is, are they going to run the ball if they fall far behind? They did against Houston. I mean, they were like out of that game and still ran. Jaylen Warren receiving yards is tempting. Do we know if Pickett is playing for sure this week, or is it the Trubisky show?
So I thought it was for sure the Trubisky show, and then I saw reports that because do you remember when it first came out and they were like, "We don't believe Kenny Pickett has a season-ending injury." And I was like, "Well, that sounds freaking terrifying." And now I saw new reports that was like, you know what, he might suit up. I just saw that comment. I guess we lost our favorite line already.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go back and build. They do change this dynamic. I mean, how do we think Trubisky playing changes things for Warren? Is he more of a dump off guy or less? Or is it just neutral?
I'm not sure. We just haven't really seen him play with Warren is the problem. So that's why I would kind of hold off on knowing how to handle that. Is that when Trubisky was playing early last year before Pickett got going, that was also when Jaylen Warren was a rookie undrafted free agent, barely playing as well. So at this point, we just haven't really seen that overlap. So generally when 2 players haven't played together, I have no idea what they're going to do in terms of a 50-50 situation. So I'll usually avoid those. If
I knew it was Pickett, I think higher than 18.5 receiving yards for Warren is tempting. Moving along, I don't know. I don't think I have the heart to do anything on the Saints end. They're pretty brutal here.
No, I'd be looking at the Kamara receptions, but they don't seem to have a high or lower for that one. So that'd be the only one
No, I
that I'd
mean
be
maybe
tempted
they
by.
have some rivals with him. You know how you can do the
Mhm.
rival ones where it's like him versus
Yep.
another
The head to
player.
head.
Like who do you think if Belichick defenses try to shut down the top guy? Who are they shutting down? Is it Olave? Is it Kamara? Are they going to let Michael Thomas get his 60 receiving yards? Like he doesn't seem like a priority to stop. And if Carr can't push the ball, that's a tempting line for a team that just lost Christian Gonzalez for the year, I believe.
Mhm. Yeah, my concern with the betting the Saints overs would just be the Carr's shoulder. He
Yeah.
looked atrocious last week. I don't think it's quite healed. I think that's partly why Kamara had 14 targets. Is Derek Carr's arm was just hurting. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a game in general I'm just not that excited about. Like I would lean just a lot of unders or kind of leave it as a pass. I think the game total was 39 the last time I checked.
Yeah, it's brutal.
People are not expecting all that much excitement from this one.
Lower on Patriots things are just tempting each week.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone over 221 passing yards for the past. I mean, he got benched last week on Mac Jones, and the Saints
Mhm.
defense is pretty good. So lower on Mac Jones passing yards is a line to keep in mind for me. No chance to short the Zeke unders, unfortunately. Just a touchdown over. No, thank you. Moving along. I mean, like some overs on like the tackles numbers in this game is tempting. If it's gonna be, if Kamara is gonna get, let's say, 8 catches, just the linebackers are gonna be tackling again and again and again on New England side,
Mhm.
especially if it's a bunch of 3 and outs. As gross as it is, some Miami overs are tempting to me, where it's like this, or this, some Giants overs are tempting to me, where
Yeah, I like the Jones pass attempts over myself.
pass attempts. Yeah. I mean, that's a
I
pretty
think
good
that
one
would
where
be
we
the
don't have
interesting
to
one.
count on him. Wandale Robinson is going to be chalk in DFS land. It kind of seems like, he was, him and Jalen Hyatt finally took the like 2 and 3 roles in this offense, maybe even 1 and 2. The Wandale over is definitely a line to keep in mind for me, where this Giants O line is so brutal that once they get pressure, it's just going to be a lot of dump offs to Wandale. How do you feel about the Wandale one?
I would like the receptions over if they had it a little better, just because his average depth of target is like 5 yards downfield.
I know
But
his
I
ADOT's
think
brutal, but
I think he probably hits that receiving yards over. If I had to choose, I'd go over. But I mean, I kind of like the head to head of taking Tyreek Hill to have 50 more yards than him. I'm sure that's the fish play, but that was the best looking one I saw so far.
all right, well, we'll keep it moving. I'd
Mhm.
consider it my slips, but we're gonna build this together. Miami
Uh-huh.
side, I think just over on Tua's is tempting.
Mhm.
Higher on Achan, just anything higher on it is
I
tempting. He's
took
gonna be
I
massive
took
chalk
his
this
rushing
week.
yards over on a sports book already yesterday. So
What line
definitely
did you
interested
get
in
for
that.
that?
Uh 50 and a half or 51 and a half.
Yeah.
But the odds were like minus 105. So it ends up translating pretty similarly to taking higher 49 and a half on this platform, if that makes sense. So I got it at like essentially the same number when you're thinking about the odds. What I liked about Achan was that I think he can get this in like 7 to 11 carries.
Yeah, and
He,
he is both gonna have, like, he already seems like he has like the goal line role, and then he's going to be the garbage time back too. Where it's not like they're going to be running Mostert out there. I don't think Jeff Wilson is going to be active this game, but something to monitor, I guess.
they're like 12-point favorites. I don't think there's any reason to rush Jeff Wilson back. Yeah, with Achan, I wrote him up. He had 18 carries 2 weeks ago. So we know he can handle high volume. The next week, he only had 8 carries. They were in a terrible game script against the Bills. I'm sure as a Bills fan, you watched and enjoyed that game. And again, if he only had 8 carries last week, but we know he can get up to 18, he's pretty fresh. The Giants have allowed over 100 rushing yards to running backs all 4 games. The lead back against the Giants has at least 70 rushing yards in all 4 games as well. I think Achan's going to get 12 to 15 carries. I think he needs 7
The,
to
the
11.
weird thing about the
I hit
Giants is
that
they
over.
blitz so much, so it could just be a lot of dump offs in the air to Achane, which would not help his rushing yards, but the defense is not great. Smythe over, I'm kind of tempted by that. How do you feel about that?
I like that one. Yeah, I was right when you scrolled to that. I was like, let me quickly glance at this because my good buddy Ben Wolby has already messaged me about how he's going to take some Durham Smythe overs this week. So I think that's probably a pretty good one.
Fant tore up the Giants D.
He did.
It's not their linebackers are just like always bad in Giants land. Moving along. I don't have the heart to take some Tannehill overs, but he is facing a bad secondary that lost another corner.
Yeah, the one I'd consider actually, it sounds crazy, is actually the Hopkins receiving yards over.
Yeah.
There's no Burks. The Indianapolis Colts have the worst perimeter corners potentially in the entire NFL.
Yeah. I mean,
there's just nobody else for Tannehill to throw to, essentially.
This feels like the DJ Moore line versus the Commanders, where it's like
that's a good parallel. Yeah,
bad team, alpha, good spot.
Yeah, I think he's 2-2 on that number. So like it's kind of been a mixed result. However, what I will say is one of those where he was under it was the week he sprained his ankle and he didn't look healthy. So really we can kind of say like he's 2-1 when he's not like extremely injured and playing through it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great like betting on a Titans passing game offense as part of your slip, but honestly, it's a line I like. Richardson lines. I don't know. I really don't know how to play Richardson against the Titans because they're good against the run, but are they good against a running quarterback like Richardson, or is he so electric it doesn't even matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd probably pass on that one. Kind of exactly what you mentioned. Titans defensive front is top 5. They've got some speed. It's not at Richardson's level, but yeah, I think ultimately like that's a trenches matchup where I think both defenses win it. I think the Colts dominate the Titans offensive line, and then I think the Titans kind of dominate the Colts offensive line. So that's kind of why I was like, oh, like DeAndre Hopkins, they've worked him pretty short in the field.
We didn't get any Colts defensive players. Otherwise, I'd be tempted on a sack there. In the Atlanta-Houston game, kind of I'm tempted on the Nico Collins lower and maybe even parlayed with the Tank Dell higher, where I'm just kind of guessing that the shadow corner for Atlanta will match up on Collins like Terrell. He did on Ridley.
Yeah, AJ Terrell is one of the best in the business.
Do you think he's gonna shadow Collins?
That I don't know, but I do know that the Falcons have pretty much shut down receivers this year. Though also the Texans have kind of shown that no one can stop their pass attack.
Yeah,
I'd just be a little bit worried because the Texans' default has been 11 personnel, where there's 3 receivers on the field, and that's just going to be really, really difficult for a defense to cover when that's their base package essentially.
Did the Jags not run a bunch of 11? I mean, in Jacksonville land versus.
No, I don't believe they did because they didn't have Zay Jones.
I know,
but remember it was the other Jones. It was like Tim Jones.
Yeah,
I don't think Tim Jones was out there too much. I'll pull that up live.
Yeah, I'll pull up the utilization report from Fantasy Life.
Tim Jones did not run a full set of routes.
Did they run 12 or let's see here? Shout out Fantasy Life here. They got a great utilization tool.
Yeah,
Jaguars wide receivers week 4. So Tim Jones 64% and Jacob Harris 8%.
Yeah, it looks like they were running a lot of 11.
Yeah, a decent amount of 11. So I mean, it's not a 1-to-1 though, because in Atlanta's eyes, I could see them being like, look, we only have to deal with Ridley and Kirk in the passing game. Like, who cares about Tim Jones, right? But Houston has, I mean, maybe they could say, hey, we only got to deal with Tank Dell and Robert Woods in the passing game if we take out Nico Collins, who just lit it up. So I kind of think Nico will draw shadow coverage. Is he good enough to beat it? Maybe, but what AJ Terrell did last week was like unheard of in the NFL, where he like shadowed at like 80% or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd consider something where we take Dell or Woods against Collins. We could do a little head-to-head.
Oh, a rival here? Let's see.
We could do a rivals with Woods or Dell.
Yeah, Dell plus 18.5. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Or do they have a receptions one potentially with one of them? Receptions, I think, would be really interesting. I'm not sure if we're going to get that.
Dell versus Drake London receiving yards also is tempting.
It was a good day to bet against the Falcons pass attack.
Bijan, it just kind of feels like the Bijan breakout. So higher on the fantasy points is calling to me. It's a high line, 15.85, but he's gotten over that with like he has no touchdowns on the year other than week 1 and that receiving one. And it seems like he's becoming more of the offense and Algier is becoming less of the offense.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I think I'd like is I'd consider the Bijan total yards just because of his involvement in the passing game. I think that's pretty interesting. I'm looking.
I like that 112.5.
I mean, the guy's he's averaged like 150 total yards the past 2 weeks, if I remember correctly.
So how many he needs?
Let's see.
That versus fantasy points, he needs a touchdown or yeah, it's pretty similar lines.
Yeah, I think the fantasy points one's pretty fun. Just because I think without a touchdown, he can still get there.
Yeah, with like reception.
But I think he scores. So yeah, I'd be interested in Bijan over. I think I like
the total yards of the one because if they do trail, we're gonna get some dump offs.
I think he's still their leading target on the season in terms of total targets. I think he might still be edging out Drake London. As funny as that is, let me look. Bijan is at 22 targets on the season.
This Kyle Pitts line is depressing. 27.5.
Do they have Jonnu? Because some of the betting markets, the betting markets had Jonnu with a higher line than Pitts. I just think on principle we should take that rival and take Pitts. I just think that's offensive.
He doesn't look healthy. Is the worry?
Just like on principle, I'm like I can't imagine Jonnu out.
Let's move on
50-50. Let's
move to Carolina, Detroit. It's so gross. Nothing really.
Scroll up. I found it. I think Bryce Young throws a pick.
Ooh, okay. Higher interceptions. I like that one.
Yeah, usually those are tough to find, like a high-low. Anytime I see something like that with interceptions, we'll see what the betting markets have for that line.
Okay.
They probably think it's probably going to happen, but yeah, right out of the corner of my eye, I was like, that's probably my favorite currently is just betting against Bryce Young when he's facing a surprisingly elite Lions defense.
We'll keep that one in mind. I would say the Mingo line is like pretty low for a team that's going to be trailing, and he's either bad or he's just as good as Adam Thielen is because he's gotten like high target per route runs of like 30% or so. He got concussed in that one game. 24.5 for just a team that's going to need to pass a lot. Pretty tempting there. Those are kind of like the lines I like to take. Just like,
Mingo has had a lot of targets recently, like kind of a surprising amount for how he hasn't produced. Kind of a good regression spot for him.
Yeah. On the Detroit side, the Montgomery one, would you rather take a higher on touchdowns or rushing yards if you had to choose one there?
I would definitely go touchdowns.
Touchdowns? The rushing yards is tempting too. Doesn't this feel like another 30 attempt spot for them? For Montgomery?
Probably. Yeah. My only concern is like we could see Gibbs get more work, but I do think on 10 days rest, they're going to give Montgomery a ton of work. I just think the touchdowns, the betting markets have that as such a heavily favored outcome at this point that he'll score. Yeah. And I think he scored in every single game that he's played this year, if I remember correctly.
He'll be like 30% owned on DraftKings this week plus.
The Lions goal line offense is really just David Montgomery. And last year it was really Jamal Williams. It's kind of clear to me that I wouldn't even say like it's that they don't trust Goff. I think it's that they just know they can score on the ground and then they do it.
With Jameson Williams back, I'm tempted by some Goff overs. I don't think Jameson's going to play that much this week, but I don't know. With Montgomery, it could go one of two ways. Either what I think is most likely is that, no matter how much Gibbs drafters complain, this is what they want to do. When they're winning, they're going to run with Montgomery. On the other hand, they could be winning by so much that they're like, yeah, let's get Gibbs out there a little bit. Let's, we did Montgomery last week, but his over on rushing yards tempting for me. Touchdowns too. I just don't know how he doesn't get 72.5 rushing yards unless they are losing, in which case, I still think Gibbs can pay off as a draft piece, but he's more for games against the Bills, the Chiefs, when you need more explosion in the air. The numbers that I'm going to be tempted to look at in this Philly-Rams game is definitely Philly passing or Rams passing numbers is what I meant.
I like Rams passing. I like Swift rushing yards.
Yeah, okay.
Rams have struggled against running backs. Swift is a bell cow and the best rush attack in the NFL. I think he's hit that over all 3 games as the starter, if I remember correctly. I'll pull that up just to double check that.
I can pull up here. He got 56 last week.
2 and then 3, yeah.
But he was trailing in that Washington game, so that probably
that was a weird game script.
He got 3 targets in the first drive and then no more. The Swift experience. AJ Brown overs always live to me, but really the numbers I'm tempted on are the Stafford ones. Just seeing what this Philly defense has allowed to Mac Jones, Sam Howell. I feel like Stafford passing yard, it's such a high number, and they're not giving us any of the Puka, Tutu, or Higbee receiving yards yet because I think Kupp's playing this week. I think he's going to be activated. What's your read on the Kupp situation? Obviously, we're all kind of guessing here.
From reading the tea leaves, I think he's activated, plays 70% of the snaps. I actually like the pass yards over for Stafford. Stafford has over 300 passing yards in 3 of 4 games. The one game he didn't, he had 269, which is still he's hit this in 3 or 4 games and nearly got it in the 4th. And now he gets cut back. And they're projected to lose this game. There's going to be a lot of passing. I think it's going to be a close one. I think Eagles probably pull it out. So I would definitely look at the Stafford pass yards. And I think I'd actually like Stafford head-to-head over Hurts as another way to play it potentially. Just because I think this Eagles team can run all over the Rams. So I think it was a 35-yard adjustment. I think I'd prefer Stafford there. But I think pass yards would be my favorite option if we play him.
I like fantasy points too, where Kyron Williams has been getting just a lot of the goal line touchdowns from the Rams. And I kind of like Stafford to throw for 2 touchdowns this week. Hard when he's going to be around 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, not to go over 17 points. Shout out Tyler. Thanks for the super chat. He said, went with the swizzle prop. Shout out Larky. And then I don't know if this is related, but he added that.
I'm not actually sure what he's referring to. I actually like the Stafford fantasy points over as well. Stafford, for anyone that likes 17 game paces, Stafford's pacing for over 5,200 passing yards this year. Oof. And 13 passing touchdowns. So I think we know what that means. Probably more passing touchdowns in his future. Like you said, Kyron Williams is obnoxiously involved at the goal line for a 195-pound running back. So
he's running
pretty bullish on Stafford.
He's running hot on touchdowns, and you don't run the ball on Philly. Aggravates brings up. You remember the Panthers versus Lions game last year? Panthers rushing went insane. Yeah, and just what I want to say on that is that this Detroit defense is different this year. They're not the same old Lions.
Much better, yeah.
Guys, I would look back on Sunday or Saturday, and I'd just be tempted on some Puka overs, even Tutu. I think Tutu goes from 9 targets a game, maybe to the 6 range. I don't think it's just going to be Kupp and Puka. What's your take on how the Rams offense changes with Kupp?
Yeah, I think Tutu probably has his role changed the least. I think it just drops a little bit, but I think they kind of keep him on the outside as a field stretcher. I'm actually really not sure how the Cup Puka dynamic is going to work.
No
Cup is
one.
just a much better player. I'd be so surprised if Puka's outproducing him in any form.
I think they're just both going to
They're,
produce.
I think they both produce. They're pretty similar, a little bit redundant in a way, but I think with how good Stafford is, with Tutu stretching the field, with Tyler Higbee also being a reliable option, I think you can kind of get away with having two like almost big slot types in the same offense. So yeah, I'd say Puka's probably a top 24 receiver rest of season with fantasy points. That'd be my guess, is that he's like the wide receiver 20 rest of season, with Cup being top 5, and then Tutu like a borderline fantasy wide receiver 3.
I could see Higbee just going away in the offense too, and like all that just going to Cup, Puka, Tutu, DJ Moore, Chase. Easily Jamar Chase for me going forward. DJ Moore's going to have some good matchups, but then Chase. The Rams kicker is also just lighting it up, and I don't know how sticky that is, but some tempting lines there. I don't know if I have the heart to bet Cincinnati. There are some rumblings that he is getting healthier. Chase is just going to get alpha usage without T. Higgins. So
yeah, I'd lean higher on Jamar Chase, even though it's a very high number, simply because they don't really have anything else. Tyler Boyd is averaging 0.8 yards per route run this year. Generally, you want your receivers to be closer to the 2 range. So he's like very, very, very far below that.
And Charlie Jones went on IR. So they're down to Andre Izasovius.
Is that how you say his name? I don't know how to say his name, so I was going to say it. Anytime I see multiple vowels at the start of a name, I'm like, I will let the other person on the show take a first crack at pronouncing that one.
I don't know if Higgins is confirmed out, but
is he not? Because I know he broke ribs, and generally you don't play through broken ribs.
Yeah, I think he's chalk likely out. What's sticking out to me about Josh Dobbs, man, is rushing yards. Back-to-back-to-back totals of 41, 55, and 48. His over-under is 20.5. What's your take on the Josh Dobbs experience?
Yeah, I'd lean on the rush yards over as well. One of those games was the Cowboys. Quarterbacks are just running for their lives versus the Cowboys, so I think we can kind of throw that game out.
San Fran too.
San Fran a little bit of the same, but I'd say the Giants one's pretty encouraging. It's not like the Giants have the NFL's best pass rush. They do, bro. Yeah, that's true. They're a very blitz-heavy team.
Hollywood Brown over is also tempting, where, I mean, he's just getting great usage. He's going to be chalk in DFS land. 52.5, pretty low number. Don't have the heart to take Zach Ertz. I think Michael Wilson, that's a pretty low line. He's gone over 37.5 in all games. So just like an Arizona stack of like over 20.5 rushing yards, over 52.5 receiving yards for Hollywood, and over 37.5 for Michael Wilson is tempting to me.
Yeah, I like that trio. Though I think if we did that trio, we should swap Dobbs and just go with his pass yards. If we're going to take 2 receiving yards overs, we might as well keep it correlated and take him over 219 pass yards. Yeah,
he can do that. I like 52.5. It's not like with 80 receiving yards you need the quarterback to go over 220. He'd be in the 170 range with 40 rushing yards, but moving on. I mean, Zach Ertz too. Like, this number is so low for a dude who gets like
so much usage.
Yeah, I don't know. Moving
on.
The
most outrageous usage for a team that's tanking to give their 33-year-old tight end coming off the ACL tear, like the token 22% target share. It's hard to believe.
Absurd. Let's move on here. So Minnesota blitzes a bunch, and that is why, like, the week where Josh Kelly was chalk, the reason why he didn't pay off is because Minnesota blitzes so much, he just had to pass block, right? And so the passing game pieces went off. But historically, you just don't blitz Mahomes. So I don't know what's going to give between Brian Flores and facing the Chiefs here. I could see them kind of doing something that they did against the Eagles where they just sit in the cover 2 shell and they're just like, go ahead, run for 6 yards a carry on us, which makes Pacheco tempting there. If they're not going to be blitzing, just some over on Kelsey is tempting to me. I wish we had the Rashee Rice receiving yards.
Me too.
Anything sticking out for you, Chiefs land?
Yeah, I would lean over on the Pacheco as well. He looked really good last week. He got a ton of usage. Just in general this year, he's kind of looked like their best playmaker a lot of the time. So just because Kelsey hasn't looked fully healthy with that knee injury, Pacheco's kind of looked like the best offensive weapon on the field at times for them.
We got some Chris Jones sack love in the chat. Seems tempting. I mean, this is an absurd line. 294.5 passing yards for Kirk Cousins. Like,
I mean, he's hit it in 3 or 4 games. It's been a crazy season for him.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to have to pass here. We just saw, guys, do not bet this. Cam Akers touchdown. Under on Madison rushing yards. Tempting to me where possible Akers plays even more this week than he did last week. The receiver I'm most tempted by from Minnesota is either Addison or Hawkinson. It just kind of feels like Hawkinson's going to get more in the 11 target range this game, and hard to not to go over 58.5 receiving yards. How are you feeling about Vikings land?
Yeah, I think the Addison or Hawkinson's who I'd look at. I just have a hard time betting an over on Jefferson at 105 yards. I also have a hard time betting against Jefferson and saying let's expect him to go under that. So he's kind of a stay away for me because of that.
Addison lower touchdown for him is tempting just because it's hard to get touchdowns, you know?
Yeah, that's where I would kind of go if I had to choose a Jefferson line. Is just I always like betting against guys to score touchdowns when they're a receiver. Running backs, if they're a bell cow like Montgomery, I like betting the over. Receivers, I'll almost always lean under just because a lot has to go right. And they'll often kind of stack up their touchdowns. Whereas a running back, it's just kind of usage. And it's like, oh, we were at the goal line. They got the carry. Receivers, you often see them kind of have like these big explosion games. And it's because the quarterback receiver connection is so dependent on the defense and that actual matchup itself.
Here's a team I could see myself super stacking is the Jets. Zach Wilson looked good last week. They get historically bad defense. I could see myself making a slip with like higher passing yards for Zach Wilson and higher rushing yards for Breece Hall and higher receiving yards for Garrett Wilson and high receiving yards for Tyler Conklin, where Conklin was down to 50% of the routes last week, which was kind of weird. But tight ends have been lighting up Denver. Where are you at on the Jets pieces?
I already took a Conklin receptions prop earlier this morning. They have receiving yards. I think that's a pretty good one too. Conklin's got at least 5 targets each of the past 3 games. We know the Broncos can't stop anyone. So I'd be perfectly happy if our final slip had Zach Wilson pass yards over, a Breece Hall rush yards over, a Garrett Wilson receiving yards over, a Tyler Conklin receiving yards over, and then one auxiliary player that we like from another team.
All right. On the Denver side, really nothing tempts me about the Denver's offense. If they had offered Jaleel McLaughlin, I would have been tempted on his over rushing yards, but I don't think I have the heart to take any passing props against the Jets.
I would stay away from the Broncos right now. Javonte was limited in practice yesterday, which was very surprising. I thought he was going to miss time. Maybe he won't miss time. I'm looking. Yeah, Javonte didn't practice Wednesday, and then he practiced on Thursday. So I think there's a pretty good chance he suits up. And then it just goes back to that pretty gross 3-headed backfield where Samaje Perine leads in snaps, Javonte leads in carries, and then Jaleel McLaughlin leads in total yards, which is just a horrible combination.
Now we're at the night games. I think we just make our slip from here. And I think how we're going to do this is we're just going to alternate. I'll let you go first, of course, and just give us a player, and we're going to build a pick 5 where you give us a player, then I give us a player, and we'll just do that until we have 5 players in here. So you're 101 for our slip. And you can tell me to scroll if you need to see.
Yeah, scroll back up one more time.
Which game?
So here's what I'm trying to decide. I think we either, you know what? I'll go with Zach Wilson. We'll take his pass yards over because I know that I've already made a few parlays like this myself. I was going to say the other one that's interesting is going a Rams stack in some form, but the problem is we don't have any lines out. So even though I like Stafford to go over or higher, I guess we can't really put him with much. So we'll start off with a jet. Zach Wilson.
Do you want to just get your stack there and then add which player you want to correlate him with? Do you want to do the comp?
No, we'll keep alternating. Yeah, I'm not sure yet. I'm marinating on which Jets player he's going to get paired with. So
okay,
we've got a little time.
So many lines that I liked that. Let me just scroll and let the experience wash over me here. I think I'm going to kick us off with Montgomery rushing yards. I know you like touchdowns. I like touchdowns too, but I mean, for a guy who could literally be at 25 rushing attempts pretty easily here, he'd have to average like 3 yards a carry not to get this. All right.
Let's throw Conklin in. I'm thinking about it. I like Garrett Wilson too, but Conklin ultimately at half the number feels tough to pass up. He's getting these layup targets.
Up with the
So I'm not quite sure what happened last week, but he's been second to Garrett Wilson in targets each of the past 3 weeks. So I think it's pretty clear that Zach Wilson likes him. They want him involved.
Yeah.
So I'm not too concerned. Yeah, because if you look at the routes go down, but the targets per route run skyrocketed. So ultimately, he had a pretty good day.
Like, is this a sign that they want to get Jeremy Ruckert more in the offense? That he's all the way up to 36%, or was this them? You're right. I mean, his target per hour run was 26%, which is like off the charts, great for a tight end. But okay, I like him a lot this week too. The Conklin. Okay. My next pick here. I'm gonna scroll up and look at that Josh Allen one. See if it's still at 6.
See what the rush attempts is. Yeah.
Nice to scroll the lobby, get some reminders too. Let's see. No, it's at 6 now. I mean, I still like him to go under that, but not one of my favorite 5s on the slate. Do I want to do Wandale? Do I want to do Hollywood? These are things I'm considering.
Yeah, I liked both of those.
I think I'm going to do Bijan for ours. We're just going to get these chalk running backs for our slip, and we'll take the one that you liked. You've convinced me over fantasy points, the rushing plus receiving yards. As long as they just don't go repeated 3 and outs, they have to get this. And finish us up here with our last.
You're going to hate me. I think I'm going to go for it. We're going to go back to Gus Edwards. We're going to take a rush yards over.
Oh, that's one of your favorite 5s?
Minus 145 in betting markets, which kind of implies that betting markets think it happened 60% of the time. He's been way over this number each of the past 2 weeks.
Here's the only thing I want to discuss real quick, because week 2, which is when Justice Hill was healthy, he was at 54% of the snaps, and Gus Edwards was at 46%. Now, the matchup is so good that they could be sharing this anyways. I just don't love Gus Edwards, man.
So the Steelers defense has allowed 5 yards per carry to running backs. Gus Edwards, double-digit carries each of the past 3 weeks. I think we don't have to go with Gus the bus, but just know that would have been how I would complete.
Week 2, he's still got 10 for 62. We can do Gus.
Gus the bus. Welcome to the squad.
I'm throwing this in for $100. Chance at 2K. I'm going to share this in the chat, guys, if you want to tail. The lines could change if you're watching this on repeat. Let's make one more. Let's make one more slip before we get out of here, Josh. Kick us off again.
No, I was saying you go for it. I feel like I had 3 last time. You should have 3 this time.
Okay, cool.
I have to give it to you. You conceded on Gus Edwards. So at this point, anything else is icing on the cake.
I'm going to take the rival of Nico versus Tank Dell. I already get a bonus, and I think Tank is going to outproduce Nico straight up this week. So I'm kicking us off with the rival plus 18.5.
I like that. Yeah, I have an expected fantasy points model I do. Nico Collins has the 7th most fantasy points a game this year among receivers. My expected fantasy points model does not have him as the 7th best usage. It has him as the 28th best usage. Nico Collins definitely due for quite a bit of regression at some point, quite possibly coming this week.
Yeah, this could look foolish if Nico does not get shadowed and he just goes off. But, hey, I think Tank Dell, I don't think what happened last week does not make me think that much less of Tank Dell.
I'm going to go with Achane.
Oh, I like
the rush
it.
yards over. I've already bet on that myself. As I mentioned before, running backs have just been shredding the Giants.
You took Gus Edwards for 6 yards less than Achane on that last slip.
I never felt better. Well, I mean, when you put it like that, although then I could say, well, Achane college sprinter, David Montgomery, slow. You took David Montgomery at 25 more rushing yards.
Achane is the 2-3 in Best Ball Resurrection. I think he legitimately could be a first-round pick if he stays healthy. All right, the next one is on me. I'm going to do the Hopkins over receiving yards.
It went up. Did you see that? I think it was at 50.5 a few minutes ago.
Was it? I mean,
I still like the over now, but
yeah, I mean, the people are watching our show. They're betting up our lines, but is what it is. I still like it at 52.5. It was lower earlier.
I like.
If we weren't man of the people, we would super scroll, not say, we would privately chat our lines, and then we would be like, all right, unload. Here are the slips before the numbers adjust.
Let's scroll up to the beginning again.
Okay. Any particular game you want me to hit on?
Just keep going. I think we've been on a rushing kick, so I will go with that ETN rush yards over if that's still in the
mid top 5s.
I just think that's a fun line. It's not necessarily my top
out of this game. I'm not as convinced this Bills defense is as bad against explosive rushers as.
All right, we won't take that then. We already took a Gus Edwards one. We won't take ETN, who's had at least 18 carries in 3 or 4 games. We won't lean into.
I mean, what happened against Atlanta? How do you get 55 rushing yards? It's because your O-line is just that brutal.
I think it's because they were in London. It's tough to play in London, and now they've got the full week to. They've got the full week to adjust. They've time zoned it. I think it shows it. It's really, really difficult to perform at a high level in London.
63.5 is the high line for a running back.
All right, we won't do ETN.
We can do it. Just ruminate on it. Give me another one, and if you really wanted to do that,
scroll down towards the bottom. I think I might take one from the Jets game or whatever the game was that was right above Jets Broncos. I think we could repeat
one, but we're not going to do that here.
No, we don't. No, too many good lines for us to need to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Is there a rivals for Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith? Please tell me that I can bet Kyle Pitts will have more yards than Jonnu Smith.
So you're not concerned about this injury? Let's see. Kyle Pitts.
There it is.
We have him versus Mac Hollins and versus Jonnu.
I am taking Kyle Pitts 1.5 adjusted against Jonnu Smith. That is now my highest conviction play of the day. I think Kyle Pitts, but
that's the only way I can bet on Kyle Pitts with you. And I will take Mingo receiving yards. Just a low line for a guy who they're going to be trailing this whole game. I mean, he can do that on 4 catches. All right, here is the line, the slip there. Josh, thanks so much for coming on, man. This was really fun chopping up the pick'ems with you. I believe you're doing another pick'em show later today. You want to tell the people where they can watch that and anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, first off, Liam, thanks for having me. I think one thing I like about our dynamic is that we're friends and we also disagree on a lot of stuff. And I think people generally enjoy that when 2 people can disagree on stuff and everything's just totally fine. And it's hey, we're at work. We're not always going to agree. And I think that also means when we agree on a line, it's probably going to do pretty well. Like the Mingo one, great usage. We both think he's due for a little regression in the positive direction. In terms of the prop show that I do, that will be streamed live on Twitter a little bit after 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So I'd say if you look at my Twitter feed around, or the 33rd team Twitter feed around 2:30-ish, then you would see myself, Ben Wolby, and Ryan Reynolds will each take 3 prop bets from the sports books. So there'll be 9 props in 15 minutes for you there. We just kind of go rapid fire where we show up at the show. We know exactly what we're taking. We just tell the people why we take it, and then we log off. So I think it's kind of a nice compliment to this, where this one's kind of like us really thinking through it, kind of coming into these lines, talking back and forth about it. So I think that's pretty good dynamic as well for anyone out there. And everything else, just go to the33team.com. My content is free. So anything that you're subbing to with Liam, that you're paying for with Liam, you don't have to pay anything else right now. You can just simply check out content that I'm doing if you like anything that I'm doing.
All right. Yeah. And I have an article I wrote about if you're playing Best Ball Resurrection. I wrote an article that is either out on the 33rd team or going to be out soon.
Just came out. Yes.
Just kind of hitting
I can tweet out that link for you.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. So check out that article. Great weekend of football we have up and coming. Exciting, where we get Bills-Jags kicking it off in the Sunday game. 2 possible ways that game goes. Either Bills just stomp them, or the game's a little bit more competitive. Maybe the jet lag catches up to Buffalo. I'm excited for that to kick off before, two high total games this week: Rams, Philly, and Chiefs, Minnesota on the main slate. And of course, the Dolphins could go nuclear against the Giants. So peace out, guys. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Good luck on any slips you make this weekend, and see you next week. Peace.